Nilay and I have known each other for probably 20 years, and we've been talking about a lot of these issues, probably for about 20 years. So the landscape, I just kind of want to dive in on this. The landscape has obviously changed so dramatically, but you and I both come from a place where we care a lot about the First Amendment. We care a lot about freedom of speech. And I think we came to this work, both of us, I don't want to speak for you, so interrupt me if I'm wrong, really seeing the internet as, creating a space for more information to more people. We were both like young and geeky and excited about that. Where are we now? What happened?
Oh boy. Well, if I have one message for this group of people, it's that if you don't know who your company's First Amendment counsel is or your defamation counsel, and you've never bought them a cookie, go do that. Do it right now. Like the overwhelming threat to the First Amendment and freedom of speech that the Trump administration and Brendan Carr at the FCC and Elon running Starlink represents it's almost impossible to quantify. I'm being dead serious. Thank you for clapping. And so Julie and I know each other because, 20 years ago I started writing about net neutrality, and Julie was at the EFF. Net neutrality, right, is a very simple concept. It's like Comcast can't throttle content on the internet. It can't favor some service over another one. It can't put data caps on NBC and it can't put data caps on Netflix and let NBC go through. Okay, that's fine, right? I think we all understand that. Well, you now live in a world where all of our media is distributed by giant platforms, where Elon put his thumb on the algorithm as hard as he could on Twitter. There's a study out last week saying the Twitter algorithm now openly favors right-wing content, and Elon Musk personally, which I think all of us can see. Meta just took all that content off of Threads. So the edge providers, the platform providers that distribute media, are now actively making decisions, political decisions, and there's not really net neutrality at the network level, right? So that can go away too. And then Brendan Carr, the presumptive chairman of the FCC, his idea for how we'll bring internet access to rural America is Starlink, which is owned by Elon Musk. And so if Elon has already shown his willingness to change the Twitter algorithm, what is going to stop him from saying, you know what, actually I don't want left-wing websites or sites that I perceive to be left-wing to be shown on Starlink. I only want the Daily Wire. That'll be excused from the data caps in NBC News or CBS News. They'll hit your data cap and actually be slower than the other websites. You'll go to that more often. I'm mad at Mark Zuckerberg. I'm going to make sure that Instagram doesn't get through at the same rate or the video quality is degraded versus the X platform, which I own. There's just not a regulatory barrier between the network and the platforms that distribute the content and actual free speech. That it's totally collapsed and it's gone away. On top of that, I don't mean to just keep ranting, Julia, but Julie was like, I'm going to cue you up. On top of that, they keep making noises about suing journalists all day, every day. Trump, I think 2 days ago, was like, Ann Selzer should be investigated for her bad poll. She was investigated. People voted and she was wrong. That's the investigation. That's the accountability that free speech demands. And instead, you have the President of the United States ranting about investigating some pollster. That's just a light example. So I look at the landscape of tech, which we cover. I run what is effectively a punk rock magazine about cell phones. We get to just say it out loud, right? That's fine. It's a culture magazine. And I say, what is the problem in our culture? Where's the rot in our culture that technology has enabled? And it is actually synthesis of control over speech, control over distribution, and now the government's interests. And those government's interests are deeply messed up. Elon is not elected, but he has interests. He's going to tell you that the Teslas that are self-driving are not crashing, and if some platform does publish that, he has the ability at the network level and at the platform level to unpromote that content, to take it away from you. And I would just encourage everyone in this room to really think about what that means for our distribution, for the content that we're seeing, for how we reach our audience, for what our audience is counter-programmed, and fundamentally, how we all make enough money to continue doing the work, because if we don't have distribution, we're not going to make any money at all.
I want to just dig in a little bit here. First on the net neutrality piece. Mm-hmm. The suing journalists piece we're going to get to, too. I think that is just beyond terrifying. But on the net neutrality piece, I think when we were first working on this issue, I don't think I quite understood just how, like, a little tweak, how insidious a little bit can be around the edges to kind of drive people to various news sources, to various products online. I think it's sometimes hard to understand because all of us are high information news gatherers, high information users, and most people I talk to every day also are.
Yeah.
But it's like the little things around the edges, and I think you're getting to that. But as you think about how to combat the little things around the edges, how to reach people who maybe aren't high information audience members, how do you think about that? How do you think about that for your own business?
So we still insistently run a website. That's what we do. It is open distribution. You can get to us in your web browser, which sadly Google controls, but we're working on it. We are distributed via RSS. Most of my multimedia work is in podcasts, distributed via RSS, open distribution. You can see that open distribution is the thing that is the counterbalance to all this noise. If you go back to that net neutrality fight 15 years ago, who was the main character? It was Alexis Ohanian. What was he saying over and over and over again? I don't want my website to be throttled. What has really happened to the media in general is we've accepted the business models of closed platforms. So I constantly interview CEOs all the time, media CEOs, platform CEOs. I interview a lot of hosting provider CEOs lately. The CEO of Squarespace comes on the show and I say, why would anyone start a website? And their answer uniformly is, to do e-commerce and not have to pay the App Store fees. This is the most depressing answer to why would anyone start a website in human history, right? We all started websites back in the day to reach an audience, to put up what we wanted, to build new kinds of media properties. I founded The Verge with 12 of my friends, and we wanted a thing that was ours, that we could run our way. Now kids are starting media properties. They're doing it on YouTube, they're doing it on Instagram, they're doing it on TikTok, and they are building the properties that the platforms want. Every YouTuber gets their wings when they make the video about how pissed off they are at YouTube. That's the day they become business people, right? Because they're like, I can't do the thing I want. The algorithm is making me make something else. That control is a problem, and we should deal with it in various ways. I think antitrust is a good way to deal with it. But the other problem is that as you close down net neutrality, it actually becomes very hard to start a new website because Netflix can pay the ISPs to be faster. And so that is the small tweak that makes it insidious, right? Suddenly this thing that we perceive to be open, that we perceive to be democratizing, is actually much more closed down. And the incentives of all of these systems only point to some outcomes, and it is very hard to counterbalance those outcomes, especially on the platforms themselves. So we have to build our own distribution. We have to build our own networks. And we have to say, actually, we're going to go have the fight with all of our First Amendment lawyers. Do y'all take this note? I'm dead serious about this. You need to talk to the lawyers at your companies and say, are we ready? Can you describe the set of threats to the First Amendment today and predict which ones are coming tomorrow? This is a small bar, right? The First Amendment bar is a small group of lawyers, and they all just had a conference, and they are all freaking out. They're also all ready to fight, right? This is it's been boring for a little bit. Now it's going to be exciting again. But these small tweaks to our distribution, to who incentivizes you to make what work, they have a massive downstream impact on what consumers actually see and the quality of information they actually receive.
I'm a former First Amendment lawyer, so this is very near and dear to my heart, this entire conversation.
They told me to be optimistic. I'm so sorry.
One of the other kind of things I've been thinking about a lot in response to what you're saying right now is that there was a time when you started The Verge in the early days of Engadget where entrepreneurism was there was green space everywhere, and if you were young and if you were hungry and if you were interested in the technology, you could find a way to get out there. But now a lot of the young people who I think are really entrepreneurial and young and hungry do end up on the existing platforms. And even if some of those young entrepreneurial folks do stand up their own website, it's really I'm hard pressed to think of a small non-venture backed kind of startup
Ghost.
in the space. Yeah.
Ghost, which is I believe a nonprofit. But yeah, if I was a writer today and I was like, I'm going to go find an audience for my writing, where would I land? I would land on Substack. Right? It's obvious. Or maybe Beehive, also VC-based, or VC-backed. Substack is a political project. I think we can just describe it that way. It attracts one group of audience. It's still not profitable. I think there was a story today in the Times they're attracting more writers and somehow making less money than before. Why do they continue to exist? Like, what business gets to continue to exist with that problem embedded in it? The one that's funded by a bunch of VCs. I have lots of friends on Substack. I hope everybody makes money. I hope the journalists make money and the VCs go bankrupt. That's my position. You should tell Connie. I think that's fine. But you just look at where the incentives on all these platforms are. If we were starting a magazine in the 80s, our incentives would be to make great covers and put it on newsstands and get distribution in bookstores or something. And the First Amendment fight I would have would be like, this shit's too hot for B. Dalton, right? Like, no one would care. Because I would be able to find additional distribution. It'd be like local record stores or something. That's how I read Maximum Rock and Roll when I was like a little kid, right? That shit was definitely too hot for B. Dalton. Now that doesn't exist, right? All of our distribution is mediated by our phones, by our platforms. I don't remember this First Amendment fight from when the App Store first started, but Apple would put comic book apps in the App Store and then like censor the boobs. And it's like, why is Apple in charge of comic books now? This is weird. And we kind of just let it go because the web was right there as a counterbalance. And as the web gets put under more and more and more pressure, and the internet service providers get put under more and more and more pressure, and that will happen, right? If Trump is threatening to take away the broadcast licenses of local NBC stations, you know who owns NBC? Comcast. Like, the pressures they will exist. You can see the horse trading begin today. Well, then we absolutely need to find some additional alternative distribution. I don't know what it looks like. And everyone's been talking about Twitter in this room, right? Like, first of all, don't work for Elon Musk for free. Just like, stop doing that. He's rich, he can pay you. If he wants your shit, he can pay you the money for it. Second, if you look at Blue Sky or Mastodon or Threads, embedded in them is an idea about open distribution, right? The idea that there's federation, that you can take your account to another service. Blue Sky is really interesting because they have composable moderation. Their monetization strategy overall is to sell you algorithms or different kinds of feeds, not to sell you advertising. There's something there. There's the seed of something there that is bigger than giant platform companies selling advertising.
Okay, this is going to be even more depressing. I know we're supposed to be optimistic, but one of the things I worry a lot about right now in response to this is I feel like in a lot of ways the biggest platforms, they've made it really obviously very easy to get on. You know, especially if you're not a tech person, like if you're my parents, it's pretty easy. If you want access to, if you want a Blue Sky account, that's not hard to sign up, but there is like a real switching cost, and we've seen this with the streaming wars, right? Do we call them streaming wars still? Like it was so exciting to cut the cord. I'm sure you and I spoke on stage in microphones about cutting the cords when that was like a thing, and now it's a total mess for most people. Like, how do we create a space where, this is the question I think about a lot, where it's easy enough for users who are like not, going to work and raising their kids and have a whole life. How do we make these tools and this access to the web and the content on the web easy enough for them without just like going back to the largest platforms?
Well, if I knew the answer to that question, I would not run a punk rock magazine about cell phones. One. I've been thinking about this kind of a lot, right? And because what I'm trying to sell is not sponsored unboxing videos on YouTube. Like, I just don't want to do it. We're trying to sell a story about how the technology we make changes our culture, and that is a permanent story. I'm going to give you one example just to try to ground that in something, and then I promise I will answer your question. How many of you would put a camera in your bathroom? Good answer. How many of you are holding a phone right now? How many cameras are on your phone? It's not one. It's absolutely not one. It's like 4. How many of you take your phones into the bathroom? It's crazy. It's just nuts. It's like already nuts. Like we've already broken our own contract that we all made with each other when we said we wouldn't put cameras in the bathroom. We're like, I'll take 6. It's nuts. Those cameras, by the way, were invented at JPL in like the 90s. Right? The CMOS sensor was invented in like the 90s at JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory part of NASA. They didn't know that Tinder would exist. Can you imagine being a NASA scientist being like, I don't know, make this camera sensor. We're going to fuck up romance forever. That's technology and culture. That is the connection. We make these things, they change the culture, and then we make things that reflect the new culture that we made. So I'm constantly thinking about how do we at The Verge do that work, describe this cycle, describe the paradox of I don't want a camera in my bathroom, I'm going to the bathroom with 6 cameras. That's weird. You have to do it at a remove. You have to be apart from it. You cannot describe what YouTube is on YouTube. You cannot describe what TikTok is on TikTok. The remove is what brings you the objectivity. The remove, and if you can describe that remove to the audience and say, I am not a part of that. I'm just looking at it. I'm clearly saying what it is. That is what builds you the trust with the audience that is sorely lacking across our media. Because most of our media right now is looking at TikTok and YouTube and saying, how do I become more like that? And I'm not saying we shouldn't participate there. I think that's where the young audience is. I think we should all go find a young man watching TikTok right now and be like, what the fuck? Right? Just like be better than whatever is happening to you. But if we don't have the remove, then we can't build the trust because we can't describe it clearly without seeming like we are part of the system. So when I think about how do we make this easier for people and how do we participate, I just keep
before you get there, I want to follow up. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because I want to follow up on that point. One of the things I've wondered about tech journalism for a while, particularly the space you're in, is there's kind of 2 lanes. There's like the cell phone review, there's like the gadget lane, right? And people are into that. And then there's this whole other lane that's super important. And I run an organization called Tech NYC that is like now getting into everything because tech is in everything. Like, what does the word tech even mean? I don't know. Maybe you have an answer. But as you think about those 2 lanes, it strikes me that the second lane, where you need the remove, and I agree with you, is probably one of the most important things in our entire society right now. Some of these changes that are being powered by tech. So we'll get back to my other question. I'm much more interested before we run out of time on how you think about that and the future of tech. What is tech journalism? What's the future of tech journalism? Can you even define tech journalism?
The problem is I can't say if I could do that, I would not run a punk rock magazine itself, because I do run the magazine about cell phones. Challenging question. I can, and I think this idea that we have this fight on our own team every single day. The idea that what we run is like a toy magazine over here and a policy magazine over here is a mess, right? You're not going to move the audience from here to there. And I think you get really confused when you distribute onto platforms because the platforms only ever want you to be at one thing. So if I run a great gadget review TikTok channel and in the middle of it, my policy reporter shows up and is like, I need to tell you about why the Clue app just made a video saying we will never turn over your fertility data to the government, which is like a real thing they did. You should go watch this TikTok. They're like defiantly being like, we'll never do this. You know why they did that? Because they're in Germany. That's it. That's the whole answer. And our government can't touch them in Germany. That's super interesting. You can't put that on the gadget unboxing channel, right? The platform will close you down. I can put that right next to pictures of cell phones on my property where the expectation of the bundle is that it's about everything. And so I just keep coming back to The Verge is about something. It is about the relationship of the products and the culture and how, in particular, all this technology is here. The only reason any of it exists is for us to make art. I promise you this is true. It is for us to make the culture together, for us to build communities together. Yes, there is a lot of weird billionaires who have a lot of weird ideas about what that means and how they can make money from it, but that is its purpose. That's why we keep making it. We insistently keep making it so that we can actually build a culture together. So I just try to smash them together. I try to force our team to smash those ideas together every single day. Right before we got on stage, Julie was showing me pictures of her kids. They're beautiful kids. And every time she scrolled a picture, it played a little video clip, right? Like the iPhone does. That is just a new invention. Our expectation that the photos should move is like a wholly new invention, right? And my daughter, who is 6, she's always pushing the phone to make the photos move. That is her expectation of the photo. That is a technology problem. Those photos also mean that your photos are no longer photos. They're 2 files. One's a photo and one's a video. And they get bundled together with a little piece of metadata that does not play well on other fucking platforms. That's a weird problem that people, once you bring them to the photos move, you can bring them all the way back to Apple insists on pronouncing it Heath, and actually it's 2 files and it doesn't play well on Instagram. And there's just a lot there that I think once you open the door, you can explain a lot of very complicated problems because you're just talking about people's experiences.
This is actually, we have 17 seconds left, but I just want to say one thing that you just I want to talk for a second about the live photos. I think that, and we are going to end on an optimistic note because I'm a rule follower.
Yeah.
We're both good Midwestern kids. That the technology for so many of us still feels like magic, and I hope it always feels like magic. Like, it is awesome that the photos do that. It would be better if they did it on more platforms, but it's really, really cool. And that, I think, is why a lot of us, I think I can speak for you here, but tell me if I'm wrong, I think that's what originally got us to this work, that it was really, really cool. And I think it's on all of us, to continue to push the culture, thinking about the technology in the right way. And I cannot think of a time in my adult life when it has been more important than it is right now. So I'm grateful for you for doing the hard work, and I'll be yelling at you in the background.
2 things. 1, use the technology to make art. And 2, call your fucking lawyers. I'm dead serious. Thank you.
Thank you.